My parents smiled and said, "Be independent," then refused to pay for college while secretly funding my brother. I worked nights, lived on caffeine, and built a life I didn't owe them. 9 years later, they called it a family emergency. But on their kitchen counter, I found a folder with my name on paperwork I never signed, and a lie that could destroy my future. The envelope weighed almost nothing, but it felt heavy enough to anchor me to the oak floorboards of our kitchen. It was a thick, cream-colored packet with the university seal stamped in blue ink on the corner. I had opened it 3 times already just to make sure the word "Congratulations" was still there, printed in that elegant, serif font that promised a future different from the humid, stagnant summers of my hometown. I sat at the round table, the wood sticky with humidity despite the air conditioning humming in the window. My financial aid packet was spread out next to the acceptance letter. The numbers were stark. I had a partial scholarship, a grant that covered books, and a gaping hole the size of $12,000 for just the first year. My mother was at the counter, slicing strawberries into a ceramic bowl. She did not look up when I cleared my throat. My father was reading the local paper, his glasses perched on the end of his nose, a mug of coffee steaming near his elbow. "I have the breakdown right here," I said, pushing the paper toward the center of the table. "If I take the maximum student work-study hours and we apply for the Parent Plus loan, the monthly payments are manageable. I calculated it. I can contribute from my summer job savings to lower the principal right away." My father turned the page of his newspaper. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet room. He took a slow sip of coffee before setting the mug down. "We have discussed this, Anna," he said, his voice level and calm, the voice of a man who believes he is imparting great wisdom. "We want you to be independent." I looked from him to my mother. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression mild. "I know," I said, "and I am going to work. I have the library job lined up, but I cannot sign for these loans alone. I am 18. The bank requires a cosigner. I am not asking you to pay the monthly bill. I am asking you to help me get the loan so I can go." My mother sighed, a soft, airy sound that suggested I was being unreasonable. "It is about the principle. Anna," she said, "if we cosign, we are liable. If you make a mistake, it falls on us. True independence builds character. You need to feel the weight of this investment yourself so you take it seriously." My stomach twisted. I had a 4.0 grade point average. I had worked since I was 14, babysitting, mowing lawns, and bagging groceries. I had never asked for a car. I had never asked for designer clothes. I had saved $3,000 in a savings account that I monitored like a hawk. "I do take it seriously," I said, my voice rising just a fraction. "But I literally cannot get the money without a signature. Are you saying I cannot go?" "You can go," my father said, finally looking me in the eye. "You just have to figure it out like adults do. There are other ways. Private loans, different programs. You are a smart girl. You will find a solution." He stood up then, folding the newspaper. "Besides," he added, glancing around the kitchen, "we have expenses too. Your mother and I have finally decided to redo the master bath. The contractor is coming on Tuesday, and we booked that weekend in Charleston for your aunt's anniversary. We have to be careful with our credit right now." The words hung in the air. The bathroom renovation alone would cost more than my tuition gap. They were choosing Italian tile and a clawfoot tub over ensuring I could walk into a classroom in September. It wasn't that they didn't have the money. It was that they didn't want to spend it on this. On me. I gathered the papers, my hands trembling. I felt a hot, prickling sensation behind my eyes, but I refused to let it spill over. "Okay," I said, "I will figure it out." "Good," my mother said, smiling as if I had just passed a test she hadn't told me I was taking. "That is the spirit. You will thank us for this one day." I walked out of the kitchen, past the samples of granite countertop swatches sitting on the sideboard, and went to my room. I did not know it then, but that was the moment the fracture started. It was a hairline crack, invisible to the naked eye, but deep enough to eventually bring the whole house down. The office was in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a discount liquor store. The sign above the door said Student Financial Solutions in peeling vinyl letters. Inside, the carpet was a bruised shade of gray, and the air smelled like stale coffee and toner. The man across the desk from me was named Mr. Henderson. He wore a short-sleeved dress shirt that was tight around the neck, and he kept checking his watch every 3 minutes. "It is a standard private agreement," he said, sliding a stack of papers across the laminate desk. "Variable interest rate based on the market index. Deferred payments until 6 months after graduation." I tried to read the fine print. The paragraphs were dense, full of words like capitalization and accrual and default. "What is the current rate?" I asked. "It fluctuates," he said, tapping a pen against the desk. "Right now it is higher than federal, obviously, because there is no collateral. But you are lucky we can approve you without a cosigner. It is a high-risk pool." I looked at the total amount. It was enough to cover the gap for 1 year. Just one. I would have to do this 3 more times. "Is there a cap on how high the rate can go?" I asked. He sighed, a loud, impatient exhalation through his nose. "Look, sweetheart, I have an appointment coming in at 2 o'clock. Do you want the check or not? You said classes start in 3 weeks. This takes 10 business days to process. If you want to read the whole dictionary, you can take it home, but I cannot guarantee the offer holds." The panic flared in my chest again. The tuition deadline was Friday. If I didn't pay, I lost my spot in the dorms. I lost my class schedule. I lost the only ticket out of my parents' house. I picked up the pen. The plastic felt slick in my sweaty palm. I didn't understand what I was signing. Not really. I understood the math of addition and subtraction, but I didn't understand the math of compound interest and predatory lending. I didn't understand that I was signing away my future freedom for the price of a history degree. I signed. I initialed the corners. I dated the bottom line. "There you go, Mr. Henderson said, snatching the papers back before the ink was even dry. "Welcome to the real world." I walked out into the blinding August sunlight, clutching the carbon copy folder to my chest. I felt nauseous. I told myself it was just the heat. My first semester was a blur of gray concrete and fluorescent lights. I had imagined college as a place of intellectual awakening, of debates on the quad and late-night philosophical discussions. Instead, it was a lesson in exhaustion. I had the work-study job at the library, which paid minimum wage and limited me to 15 hours a week. That wasn't enough to cover food and textbooks, so I picked up a night shift at a 24-hour diner near the edge of campus. My schedule was a punishing loop. Wake up at 6 in the morning, review notes, class from 8 until 1, library shift from 2 until 5, study for 2 hours, diner shift from 8 in the evening until 2 in the morning, sleep for 3 hours, repeat. I lived on caffeine pills and the bagels they were going to throw away at the diner. I lost 10 pounds in the first 2 months. My clothes started to hang off my frame, and I had constant dark circles under my eyes that no amount of drugstore concealer could hide. The hardest part wasn't the work, it was the acting. My roommates were 2 girls named Sarah and Emily. They were nice enough. They came from suburbs outside of Chicago and had matching duvet covers. They complained about their parents calling too much. They complained about $80 textbooks. They ordered pizza 3 times a week and left the crusts in the box. One Tuesday night in October, Sarah looked up from her laptop. "God, my dad is so annoying." She said, "He forgot to transfer my allowance this morning, and now I have to wait until tomorrow to buy those boots I wanted. He is literally the worst." I was sitting on my bed, sewing a button back onto my only winter coat. I had $6 in my bank account until Friday. I had skipped dinner so I could afford to print my sociology paper. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice light. "Parents can be a lot." "Are yours coming for family weekend?" Emily asked. "My mom booked a suite at the Marriott. We are going to that fancy steakhouse downtown on Saturday. You should come with us." I froze. I hadn't even told my parents about family weekend. I knew the answer: gas money, hotel costs, the inconvenience. "Oh, they are super busy." I lied, stabbing the needle through the wool. My dad has a big project at work. I think I'm just going to catch up on sleep. You work too hard. Anna, Sarah said, shaking her head. You need to learn to relax. You are always at that diner. Why don't you just ask your parents for extra cash so you can quit? I forced a laugh. It came out sounding like a cough. I like the work, I said. It builds character. I use their words. I used my parents' weapon against myself because it was easier than admitting the truth, that I was drowning, and the people who were supposed to be my life raft were busy remodeling a bathroom. By November, I was fraying at the edges. I fell asleep in my Intro to Psychology lecture. I forgot to eat for a day and nearly fainted climbing the stairs to the third floor of the Humanities building. I was sitting in the back of the library stacks, surrounded by books I couldn't afford to buy, trying to write an essay on the French Revolution. I was crying, silent, hot tears that dripped onto my notebook paper. A shadow fell over the table. I looked up, hastily wiping my face. It was Mrs. Gable, the reference librarian. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a cardigan that always smelled like lavender. She had watched me check in for my shifts every day, watched me shelving books with shaking hands. You are here late, she said. I have a paper due. I whispered. She pulled out a chair and sat down. She didn't ask me why I was crying. She didn't ask me if I was okay. She looked at the stack of books. You are working the late shift at the diner, she stated. It wasn't a question. Yes. And you are taking 18 credits. Yes. It is cheaper. If I take the overload, I graduate faster. Less tuition. She nodded slowly. You are going to burn out, Anna, and then you will fail. And then the money is wasted anyway. I know, I said, the sob catching in my throat. I don't know what else to do. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a granola bar. She slid it across the table. Eat that. Then go to Professor Miller's office hours tomorrow. He needs a research assistant for his archives project. It pays better than the diner. And the hours are flexible. I already spoke to him about you. I told him you are diligent. I stared at the granola bar. Why? I asked. Because I see you, she said. You are fighting a war in here, and you need allies. Eat the bar. I went to Professor Miller the next day. He was a gruff man who intimidated half the student body, but he hired me on the spot. He let me access the faculty reserve list for textbooks, so I didn't have to buy them. He showed me how to structure my schedule so I had breaks. Between Mrs. Gable and Professor Miller, I found a rhythm. It wasn't easy, but it was survivable. I learned that independence wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about finding the right people to ask for guidance. People who actually wanted to help. I went home for winter break with a mixture of dread and longing. I missed my bed. I missed the smell of my mother's cooking. I missed the idea of home, even if the reality was complicated. When I walked through the front door, the smell of fresh paint hit me. The hallway was a soft, trendy gray. The kitchen had new light fixtures. Anna, you made it. My mother hugged me. She smelled like expensive perfume. My father clapped me on the shoulder. Good to see you, kiddo. How are the grades? 4.0, I said, dropping my duffel bag. Excellent. See? We knew you could handle it. My brother, Caleb, came bounding down the stairs. He was 16, a junior in high school. He had the easy confidence of a boy who had never had to negotiate a loan interest rate. Hey, Anna, check this out. He held up a sleek silver laptop. It was the newest model, the one that cost $2,000, the one I had drooled over in the campus bookstore before buying a refurbished brick that weighed 10 pounds. Wow, I said, forcing a smile. That is nice. For school? Yeah, and for my gaming channel, he said, grinning. Dad said it's an investment in my future career in tech. I looked at my father. He was busy adjusting the thermostat. An investment, I repeated. My mother bustled into the kitchen. He shows real promise. Anna, we want to encourage his interests. By the way, we need to talk about your room. We turned it into a guest space/office since you are gone so much. You can sleep on the pullout in the den while you are here. I felt the floor tilt. My room, my sanctuary, gone. But where are my things? I asked. We boxed them up in the garage, she said lightly. You don't need all that clutter anyway. You are an adult now. You don't need a shrine to your childhood. Be grateful you have a roof over your head for the month. Lots of kids don't even have that. I slept on the pull-out couch that night, the bar in the middle of the mattress dug into my back. I could hear the hum of the new refrigerator in the kitchen. 2 days before Christmas. I was in the living room reading a book. The house was quiet. My father was at work. Caleb was at a friend's house. My mother was in the kitchen, talking on the phone. She must have thought I was asleep or out, because her voice was clear and unhushed. No, I don't want to move it yet, she was saying. The market is doing well. Let it sit in the account. Pause. Yes, I know the tuition bill is high, but we can't touch that money. It is for the future. We are keeping it simple. One account for the long term. Pause. She is fine. She figures it out. She is scrappy. We don't need to worry about her. We need to focus on ensuring Caleb has what he needs for that travel program in Europe this summer. It is a vital cultural experience. I sat very still. The book lay open on my lap. That money, the account, Caleb's travel program. I stood up and walked to the kitchen doorway. My mother turned, phone pressed to her ear. When she saw me, her face went blank. I have to go, she said into the phone and clicked it off. Hey, honey, I didn't hear you come in. Who was that? I asked. Just your Aunt Linda. Boring financial stuff. Do you want lunch? You said something about an account. And Caleb going to Europe? She laughed. A brittle, high-pitched sound. Oh, you know how we dream. Just talking about hypotheticals. Don't worry your pretty head about money. Anna, that is parent business. She opened the fridge and started pulling out deli meat, effectively ending the conversation. I went back to the den, but I didn't read. My mind was racing. They were sending Caleb to Europe? They had an investment account they were protecting while I ate expired bagels? It wasn't just that they weren't paying. It was that they were actively diverting resources to everything except me. The house, the trips, Caleb. I looked at my brother differently when he came home that night. He wasn't just my annoying little brother anymore. He was the golden child, the investment. I was the expense they were trying to cut. I didn't ask again. I didn't ask about the laptop. I didn't ask about Europe. I didn't ask for gas money when I packed my car to drive back to school. I hugged them goodbye at the door. Drive safe, my father called. Don't work too hard. We are so proud of your independence, my mother added, waving. I drove 4 hours back to campus in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I just watched the highway markers fly by, counting them down. 1, 2, 3. Spring semester was harder, but I was harder too. I stopped calling home every Sunday. I switched to once a month. When I did talk to them, I gave them nothing. How are classes? My mother would ask. Fine. How is the job? Fine. Are you seeing anyone? No. I became a gray rock. I gave them no surface to grab onto, nothing to criticize, nothing to praise. I hoarded my life like I hoarded my tips from the diner. I took extra shifts. I declared my major. I found a cheaper apartment off campus for the next year. A basement studio with one window that looked out at a brick wall. It was ugly, but it was mine. I signed the lease without showing it to them. I started building a wall, brick by brick. Every dollar I saved was a brick. Every A on a transcript was a brick. Every time I fixed a problem without calling them, I added another layer. It wasn't a lesson in character anymore. It was armor. In May, right before finals. The pressure finally broke me. I was in the bathroom of the science building. It was late, maybe 10 o'clock at night. The fluorescent light was buzzing. A dying insect sound that grated on my nerves. I had just come from the bursar's office. There was a hold on my registration for the fall because of a $150 fee I hadn't anticipated. A lab fee. $150. To my parents, that was a dinner out. To Caleb, that was a new video game and a headset. To me, it was 3 weeks of groceries. It was an insurmountable wall standing between me and my junior year. I washed my hands at the sink. The water was ice cold. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale. My eyes were dull. I looked 5 years older than 18. I looked like a woman who had forgotten how to be a child. I could call them. I could pick up the phone and beg. I could explain about the lab fee. They might pay it. They might lecture me about budgeting and then write the check. But then I would owe them. I would have to listen to the speech about how generous they were. I would have to be grateful. I gripped the edge of the porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. The smell of industrial soap filled my nose. No. The word was silent, spoken only in the echo chamber of my skull. No, I would not call. I would sell my textbooks back early. I would pick up a double shift on Saturday. I would donate plasma if I had to. I was alone. The realization didn't come with a crash of thunder. It came with a quiet, terrifying clarity. I was an orphan with living parents. They had checked out. They had made their choice. They had chosen the renovation and the Europe trip and the comfortable narrative that they were teaching me a lesson. I dried my hands with a rough brown paper towel. I looked at my reflection one last time. I straightened my spine. I adjusted my backpack straps. I walked out of the bathroom and into the hallway. I went to the bulletin board near the exit and found a flyer for a weekend catering gig. I tore off the tab with the phone number. I never asked them for a single cent again. The next 3 years were not a life. They were a logistical campaign. I treated my existence like a failing corporation that required aggressive restructuring. I stopped seeing time as days or weeks and started seeing it in billable hours and pay periods. I stacked internships like firewood. In the mornings of my junior year, I worked at a boutique marketing firm, writing copy for email blasts about organic dog food. In the afternoons, I was back at the library, scanning archives until my eyes watered. On weekends, I catered weddings, weaving through drunk crowds with trays of champagne I could not afford to drink, wearing black slacks that I had to iron every Friday night to keep them looking professional. I learned to negotiate because I had no choice. When the catering manager, a sweaty man named Rick, who liked to underpay the female staff, tried to keep me at minimum wage for a second season, I cornered him in the walk-in fridge. "I know you are short-staffed for the June rush," I said, my breath fogging in the cold air. "I know the inventory system better than the new hires. I want $15 an hour and a guaranteed 20 hours a week, or I walk today." He looked at me, surprised by the flatness of my voice. I wasn't asking. I was stating a market reality. He gave me the raise. It was the first time I realized that desperation, if refined into cold competence, was a leverage all its own. By the time graduation arrived, I was 22 years old, and I felt 40. I had graduated with honors, a double major in history and communications, and a debt load that sat in the back of my mind like a tumor. $84,000. Between the private loans with the variable rates and the federal loans, I owed more money than anyone in my family had ever made in a single year. I did not tell my parents the total. They did not ask. They came to the ceremony. Of course, my mother wore a floral dress that probably cost 3 of my loan payments. My father wore his good suit. They sat in the bleachers of the football stadium, waving frantically when my name was called. Afterward, on the lawn, they flanked me for photos. My mother fixed my tassel, her eyes bright with performative tears. "We are just so proud," she gushed, pulling me into a hug that felt suffocating in the humid May heat. "You did it, Anna. You really did it. You see?" my father said, clapping me on the back. "We told you that you could figure it out. Look at you now." A college graduate, character built. I stood there in my polyester gown, holding the diploma folder that was currently empty because I still had a library fine to pay before they would mail the actual parchment. I looked at their beaming faces, at the way they positioned themselves for the camera so the light hit them just right. They were rewriting history in real time, in their version of the story. Their refusal to help wasn't abandonment. It was a strategic parenting decision that had produced this success. They were taking credit for my survival. I smiled for the camera. I let them take the photos. I let them buy me dinner at a mid-range Italian restaurant where my father made a toast to hard work. I let it happen because I was too tired to fight, and because I knew that if I shattered their illusion today, I would ruin the one thing I had actually earned, the right to leave. I moved to Riverton 2 weeks later. It was a mid-sized city 3 hours north, a place of glass office buildings and converted lofts that smelled like industrial cleaner. I had landed an entry-level job at a healthcare technology startup called MedCore. My title was Junior Communications Associate, which meant I wrote user manuals and fielded complaints from doctors who couldn't figure out how to log into the patient portal. The salary was $42,000 a year. To me, it felt like a fortune. Until I calculated the rent, the taxes, and the loan payments. I found an apartment in a complex that had been trendy in the 90s and was now just tired. It was a fourth-floor walk-up with beige carpet and a kitchen so small I could touch the refrigerator and the stove at the same time. I didn't care. It had a deadbolt. It had a lease with my name on it, and only my name. My life became a study in control. I woke up at 6. I ran 3 miles because running was free. I drank coffee made at home. I packed a lunch, turkey sandwich, apple, pretzels. I worked from 8:30 to 5:30. I came home. I made dinner, pasta, chicken, frozen vegetables. I read. I slept. I created a spreadsheet that tracked every cent. I knew how much toilet paper cost per sheet. I knew exactly how many miles I could drive before I needed gas. I had a column for the private loan, a column for the federal loan, and a column for the emergency fund I was building with agonizing slowness. Dollar by dollar, there was no room for spontaneity. Spontaneity cost money. Spontaneity was dangerous. I was a machine of solvency. Meanwhile, Caleb was drifting. He had decided against college. College is a scam. He told us at Christmas that year, "The real money is in entrepreneurship." My parents nodded sagely, as if he were quoting Buffett. He moved into a condo near the city center, a place with exposed brick and a rooftop deck. He drove a new car, a sleek black sedan with leather seats and a premium sound system. When I asked him how he afforded it, he gave vague answers about consulting and flipping inventory online. He is thinking like an entrepreneur, my mother told me over the phone, her voice thick with admiration. He is taking risks. You could learn something from his boldness. Anna, you are so safe. Safe. She said it like an insult, as if my safety wasn't the only thing keeping me from drowning. I tried to be the bigger person. I really did. I told myself that jealousy was a waste of energy. I told myself that we were just different. I kept sending gifts for birthdays and holidays. I sent my mother a silk scarf for her birthday, paid for by skipping coffee for a month. I sent my father a leather-bound grilling journal. My mother called me when the scarf arrived. "It is beautiful." "Anna," she said, "the color is a little bold for me, but I appreciate the thought. It is nice to see you finally acting like an adult and managing your money well enough to be generous." The compliment had a hook in it. Finally, as if I hadn't been managing my money since I was 18, as if I hadn't been the only adult in the room for years. The turning point came on a Tuesday in November. It was a gray, sleeting day in Riverton. I came home from work to find a letter in my mailbox from a financial servicing company I had never heard of. Notice of transfer. It said in bold letters, "My private loan," the one I had signed for in that strip mall office with Mr. Henderson, had been sold. The debt had been bundled and transferred to a new servicer called Apex Trust. I felt a prickle of unease, but I told myself it was routine. I logged onto the new website to set up my autopay. The screen loaded. I stared at the balance. It was wrong. It wasn't just a little wrong. It was catastrophically wrong. The principal amount listed was $12,000 higher than it should have been, and the interest rate, the rate I had fought to keep track of, was listed at 11% instead of the 7% it had been when the loan was sold. I called the customer service number immediately. I sat on the floor of my living room, still in my work coat, listening to a loop of synthesized jazz for 45 minutes. Finally, a human voice answered. "Apex Trust. This is Jason." "Hi, Jason. My name is Anna Simmons. My loan was just transferred to you. There is a mistake on the account. The balance is incorrect, and the interest rate has jumped. Let me pull that up," he said, sounding bored. I heard typing. "Ms. Simmons?" I see the transfer here. The balance reflects the capitalization of unpaid interest from the deferred period, plus late fees. Late fees? I said, my voice rising. I have never been late, not once. I have the bank statements to prove it. And the interest was already capitalized upon graduation. You cannot capitalize it twice. Our records show a gap in payment during the transfer period, Jason said, and the rate is variable. The terms of the original note allow for adjustment upon transfer of ownership. That is not legal, I said, my hand gripping the phone so hard it hurt. You cannot change the terms of a promissory note just because you bought the debt. And I paid. I have the confirmation number for last month. Look, ma'am, I just see what is on the screen. If you want to dispute it, you have to submit a written request with documentation. It takes 60 to 90 days to review. Until then, the amount due is the amount due. If you don't pay it, we report it to the credit bureaus. I hung up and threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the sofa cushion and hit the floor. I stood in the center of my silent apartment, shaking. 60 to 90 days. If they reported a delinquency, my credit score, my precious, perfect 750 score that I had guarded like a diamond, would tank. If my score tanked, I couldn't rent a new apartment. I couldn't get a car if mine broke down. I was alone. There was no one to call. My parents would tell me I hadn't read the fine print. Caleb would tell me to just chill. I picked up the phone. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I went to my file cabinet, a metal box I kept under my desk, and pulled out every single statement I had saved since I was 18. I spent the next 4 months fighting a war. I wrote letters. I sent certified mail. I filed a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I called Apex Trust every single week, documenting the name of every person I spoke to, the time of the call, and exactly what they said. I woke up at 5 in the morning to draft rebuttals before work. I spent my lunch breaks faxing documents from the machine at the office, hoping my boss wouldn't notice. I fixed it. It took me 6 months. But I fixed it. They removed the extra $12,000. They reinstated the interest rate. They scrubbed the late fee. But the victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like trauma. I became obsessively responsible. I stopped trusting digital auto payments. I manually pushed every transaction and took a screenshot of the confirmation screen. I increased my emergency fund goal from 3 months of expenses to 6 months. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Evans, who had kind eyes and charged me $120 a session on a sliding scale. I paid for it myself. I paid for everything myself. I developed a hard rule, one I repeated to myself like a mantra. I will not co-sign. I will not lend. I will not mix my finances with anyone, ever again. I built a fortress of solvency around myself. It was lonely inside, but it was safe. 2 years later, I went home for a family reunion. It was held at my aunt's house, a sprawling property with a pool and a newly paved driveway. The whole family was there. Cousins, uncles, people I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. I drove my 5-year-old Honda Civic, which I had paid off early. I wore a blazer and jeans, my uniform of competent adulthood. My parents were holding court by the grill. My father was flipping burgers, telling a story about a fishing trip. My mother was showing photos of Caleb's latest venture, a pop-up retail concept that seemed to involve selling vintage sneakers. Look at him. My mother was saying to my Uncle Ted, he has such a mind for business. We always knew he needed room to fly. I grabbed a soda from the cooler and walked to the edge of the patio, trying to stay out of the blast radius of their praise. Hey, Anna. I turned. It was my cousin Sarah. She was 10 years older than me, a no-nonsense woman who worked as a paralegal and smoked slim cigarettes that she hid from her mother. Hi, Sarah. Good to see you. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. She took a drag of her cigarette and blew the smoke away from the crowd. You look good, she said. Tired, but good. I heard you're doing well in Riverton. I am. I said, it is steady. I just got a promotion to senior specialist. Good for you, she said. She glanced over at my parents, then back to me. Her voice dropped, becoming low and intimate. You know, It is impressive. Really. What is? That you did it the hard way. I stiffened. What do you mean? Sarah tapped Ash onto the grass. I mean, watching Caleb strut around with that car. It has to be annoying. I saw the checks. You know, I froze. The soda can was cold and wet in my hand. What checks? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked confused. For his school. The tech institute he went to for a year before he dropped out? And the seed money for this sneaker thing. My mom mentioned it. Aunt Janet told her they pulled from the home equity line to cover his tuition up front, so he wouldn't have loans. The world stopped spinning for a second. The sounds of the party, the laughter, the splash of kids in the pool, the sizzle of burgers, faded into a dull roar. They paid for his school? I asked. Sarah's face changed. She realized she had stepped on a landmine. Oh, shit. Anna, I thought you knew. I assumed they did the same for you. Just maybe less of it. No. I said, they told me to be independent. They told me they couldn't co-sign. Sarah looked at me with genuine pity, which was worse than the anger. Anna, honey, they paid $40,000 for that tech program. I saw the paperwork on my mom's kitchen table when your mom was asking for advice on the tax implications. I didn't hear the rest of what she said. I set my soda down on the railing. I felt a cold, white rage spreading through my chest. It wasn't the hot, tearful anger of my teenage years. It was the freezing, absolute zero of a glacier calving. I walked across the patio. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I walked straight to where my parents were standing. My father saw me coming. He smiled, holding up a spatula. Burger? Anna? Medium rare. Just how you... Did you pay for Caleb's tuition? The question cut through the air like a knife. The chatter nearby stopped. My mother froze, her wineglass halfway to her mouth. My father's smile faltered, then reassembled itself into a look of patient confusion. What? Where is this coming from? Did you pay? I asked, spacing the words out. Cousin Sarah says you used a home equity line. You told me you couldn't co-sign for me because of the bathroom renovation. You told me independence builds character. Did you write a check for him? My mother set her glass down. She laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. Anna, this is hardly the place. We are at a party. Answer the question, I said. My father sighed. Lowering the spatula, he looked at me with that familiar disappointment, as if I were being difficult on purpose. We helped where it made sense. Anna, Caleb is different. He is not academic like you. He needed a different kind of start. We were in a different financial position then. You were in a different position 2 years after I started? I asked, when I was working night shifts and skipping meals. We helped you too, my mother interjected, her voice shrill. We fed you. We raised you. We bought you a car when you turned 16. You bought me a 10-year-old sedan that broke down every month. I said, and I paid for the repairs. That is not the point. You lied. You framed it as a moral lesson. You watched me drown and told me to swim. And then you built him a boat. My father's face hardened. The jovial grill master was gone. Don't keep score. Anna, he snapped, it is unbecoming. We did the best we could for both of you based on what you needed. You were strong enough to handle it. Caleb needed more support. You should be proud that we trusted you enough to let you stand on your own 2 feet. Don't keep score. The phrase landed like a slap. It was the ultimate silencer. To count the cost was to be petty. To notice the inequality was to be ungrateful. I looked at them. I looked at the way they stood together. A united front of denial. They believed it. That was the most terrifying part. They truly believed that their neglect of me was a compliment, and their enabling of him was a necessity. I am not keeping score, I said quietly. I am looking at the scoreboard. And the game was rigged. I turned around and walked away. Anna, don't you walk away from me, my father called. I kept walking. I walked through the house, out the front door, and to my car. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I was done crying over them. I started the engine and drove back to Riverton. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I pulled back after that. I stopped calling once a month. I stopped sending the thoughtful gifts. I sent a card for Christmas, signed with my name. No personal note. I focused on my career. I got another promotion. I moved to a slightly better apartment, one with a dishwasher and a balcony. I dated a man named Mark for 6 months, but broke it up when he asked to borrow money for rent. I couldn't do it. The panic was too deep. But the question lingered. It sat in the quiet corners of my mind when I was falling asleep. If they had lied about the tuition, if they had hidden $40,000 of support for Caleb while watching me sign predatory loans, what else had they done? My mother's voice from that phone call years ago echoed in my memory. The account. Keeping it simple. What account? Whose name was on it? I told myself to let it go. I told myself I was independent now, and the past was dead. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and it was growing roots in the dark. I just didn't know yet that the roots were wrapped around my own name. At 32, I finally reached a place where the ground beneath my feet stopped shaking. It was a strange sensation. Stability. For so long. I had treated every paycheck like a sandbag thrown against a rising flood. But now, the waters had receded. I had been promoted to Director of Communications at MedCorp. The title came with a corner office that overlooked the Riverton skyline and a salary of $85,000 a year, to the wealthy. That amount might have been negligible, but to me, it was a fortress. It was enough to max out my retirement contributions, pay my rent without checking the balance first, and buy organic produce without feeling a pang of guilt. I had moved into a new apartment in a building called the Meridian. It had a doorman, a gym on the second floor, and soundproof walls. My furniture wasn't scavenged from roadsides or bought at discount outlets anymore. I had a velvet sofa in deep navy blue and a dining table made of reclaimed wood. Everything in that space was chosen by me, paid for by me, and owned by me. I sat at that table on a rainy Tuesday evening. A brochure for a master's in organizational psychology spread out before me. I had been toying with the idea for months. I didn't need it for my current job, but I wanted it. I wanted the credential. I wanted to sit in a classroom and learn because I chose to. Not because I was desperate to escape poverty. I ran the numbers in my head. The tuition was $40,000 for the 2-year program. I had $30,000 in my savings account, my freedom fund. I called it. I could pay the first year in cash. No loans, no signatures. Just a check written from the account I controlled. I felt a quiet, profound sense of pride. I had built a life out of scraps, and now it was whole. Then the phone rang. It was my mother. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Anna, how are you? Sweetie?" Her voice was bright, almost musical. It was a tone she usually reserved for her book club friends or the neighbors she wanted to impress. "I am fine. Mom, just finished work. How are you?" "Oh, we are good. Just busy. Your father is outside working on the landscaping. You know how he is about the hydrangeas." I waited. Usually. Our calls were brief recitations of the weather and vague updates about relatives I barely knew. But lately, the pattern had shifted. "So, I saw on the news that the healthcare sector is booming," she said, pivoting with clumsy speed. "MedCorp must be doing well. Did you guys get those bonuses you were talking about last quarter?" I tightened my grip on the phone. "We did." I said, "That is wonderful." "And the benefits? Your father and I were discussing health insurance the other day. You have the full coverage package, right? And the life insurance policy through the company? Why do you ask?" "Oh, just curiosity. We worry about you, Anna. We just want to make sure you are secure. It is a parent's job to worry." It didn't feel like worry. It felt like an inventory. It felt like a landlord walking through a property, checking the fixtures, estimating the value. "I am secure. Mom, I have it covered." "Good, good. You know, family sticks together when things get hard. That is the most important thing. Assets come and go, but family is forever." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Is Dad okay?" "Oh, fine, fine. Just getting older. We all are. Anyway, I should let you go. Love you." The line went dead. I sat in my quiet, expensive apartment, looking at the master's program brochure, and I felt a cold draft that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. 2 days later, the text came. It was a group message to me and Caleb. Family meeting. Sunday at 5 p.m. Mom made a pot roast. Please come. Important. Important. I debated not going. I could say I had work. I could say I had a date. I could say I had the flu. But the curiosity, that fatal flaw, gnawed at me. And beneath the curiosity was a layer of old, conditioned obedience that I hadn't fully exercised. If there was a crisis, I needed to know the blast radius. I needed to know if it would reach me. I drove to their house on Sunday. The neighborhood looked the same as it always did. Manicured lawns, flags hanging from porches, the aggressive normalcy of the middle class. My parents' house, a 2-story colonial with black shutters, looked pristine from the street. The siding had been power washed recently. The driveway was sealed a deep, glossy black. It didn't look like a house in crisis. It looked like a house that had just been renovated. Again, I parked my car, a newer model SUV that I had bought with a low-interest loan I pre-approved myself, and walked up the path. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She was wearing an apron over a blouse that I recognized as silk. "Anna, you look tired. Are you working too much?" "I am fine. Mom." I walked into the hallway. The smell of pot roast was thick and savory, triggering a Pavlovian memory of Sunday dinners from 20 years ago, back when I thought we were a normal family. My father was in the living room, sitting in his leather recliner. He didn't stand up when I entered. He just nodded. "Hello? Anna? Hi, Dad? Where's Caleb?" "He is running a little late," my mother said, bustling in behind me. "You know how he is, always chasing a new opportunity." We sat in the living room. My mother didn't offer appetizers. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. My father turned off the television, leaving the room in a heavy, breathing silence. "So," I said, cutting to the chase, "what is the emergency?" My father cleared his throat. He looked at my mother, then back to me. "It is not an emergency." "Exactly," he said. "It is a liquidity issue." I waited. "We have hit a bit of a rough patch," my mother added, her voice trembling slightly. "With the economy the way it is and the renovations ran over budget last year, and we helped Caleb with some legal fees for his business." She trailed off. "What kind of liquidity issue?" I asked. My father sat forward. "We are behind on the property taxes, Anna, and the mortgage." I looked around the room. The crown molding was new. The floors were new. "How behind?" 6 months, he said. I blinked. 6 months. That was foreclosure territory. "How did that happen?" I asked. "You both work. Dad, you have the pension." "We did a refinance a few years ago," my father said, his eyes shifting to the window, "to pull some equity out. For investments. The rate was adjustable. It adjusted. The payment doubled." He said it passively, as if the mortgage were a weather event that had happened to them, rather than a contract they had signed. "Okay," I said slowly. "So you need to sell the house? Downsize?" "No!" my mother cried out, as if I had suggested burning it down. "We cannot sell. This is our home. This is the family legacy. We just need to bridge the gap. We need to catch up the arrears so the bank stops threatening us. And then we can refinance again into a fixed rate. And that is why you called me." I said. My father nodded. "We need a short-term loan. Anna, just to clear the backlog. $25,000. The number hung in the air. 25,000. Almost exactly the amount I had in my freedom fund. I stared at them. "You want me to lend you $25,000? "We know you have been doing well," my mother said, her voice wheedling. "We are so proud of you. You are the responsible one. You always have been. We raised you to be self-sufficient. And look at you. You are a success. This is what independence looks like." "Anna," my father said, his voice dropping into that lecture register I hated. It means stepping up when the family needs you. It means having the capacity to help. I felt a wave of nausea. They were using my survival against me. They were framing my trauma response, my hoarding of money, my obsessive career climbing, as the harvest they were entitled to reap. I cannot give you $25,000, I said. My mother's face fell. Cannot? Or will not? I don't have that kind of liquid cash available for a personal loan. I lied, and even if I did, throwing money at the payment doesn't solve the problem. If you can't afford the new monthly rate, you will just be behind again in 3 months. We can afford it, my father snapped. Once we clear the penalties and get the new rate, we just need a clean slate. And why isn't Caleb here? I asked. Why aren't you asking him? Caleb is in a transition, my mother said quickly. He is building something. He doesn't have the cash flow right now, but you have the corporate job. You have the stability, because you didn't pay for my college. I thought, because I clawed my way here while you bought him a boat. I took a deep breath. I will not lend you the money. I said, I will not sign a loan for you. I will not co-sign a refinance. My father's face went red. We are not asking for a handout. Anna, we are asking for a loan. We would pay you back with interest, like you paid back the home equity line you took out for Caleb's tuition? I asked. The room went dead silent. We never discussed that with you, my father said, his voice ice cold. No, you didn't. But I know. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. But I locked my knees. I can help you in other ways. I said, I can sit down with you and go over your budget. I can help you list the house for sale. I can help you find a bankruptcy attorney if it is that bad. I can help you sell the second car or the furniture, but I will not give you cash. My father stood up too. He loomed over me, a tactic that used to work when I was 16. Is this how you repay us? He demanded. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. We raised you. And the moment we ask for a little help, you treat us like strangers? You are cold. Anna, you have become hard. I am not hard. I said, I am broke in the ways that matter to you. I am not lending you the money. Dad, that is final. He looked at me with a mixture of shock and fury. He wasn't used to the word no, not from me. I was the pleaser. I was the one who fixed things. Just then, the front door swung open. Hey, sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare. Caleb walked in. He was wearing a leather jacket that I knew cost at least $600 and a pair of sunglasses perched on his head. He looked healthy, tanned, and completely unbothered. He stopped when he saw us standing in the living room. He looked at my father's red face and my rigid posture. Whoa, he said, flashing a charming, crooked grin. Vibes are heavy in here. Did I miss the prayer? He walked over and kissed my mother on the cheek. She grabbed his hand as if he were a life preserver. We were just talking to your sister about the situation. She said. Caleb turned to me. Right, the house thing. Man, it sucks, right? Banks are vultures. He walked to the recliner my father had vacated and sat down, sprawling his legs out. So, are you going to hook them up? He asked me, casual as if asking if I had a spare charger. Excuse me? I said. Come on. Anna, you are the rich one now. You have the fancy director job. Mom told me you are pulling in 6 figures. I am not pulling in 6 figures, I said. And even if I were, that doesn't mean I have 25 grand to drop on a mortgage error. He laughed. Mortgage error. That is a nice way to put it. Look, they helped me out when I was starting the agency, and I appreciate that. But I am illiquid right now. All my capital is tied up in inventory. You are the one with the savings account. You are the safe bet. He looked at me with a total lack of shame. He knew. He knew they had drained their resources on him, and now he was expecting me to refill the well. I looked at my parents. They were watching Caleb with soft eyes. They weren't angry at him for being late. They weren't angry at him for being broke. They were looking at him like he was a temporary embarrassment that would soon be a billionaire. I am not doing it. Caleb, I said. He shrugged. Cold. Sis, cold. I cannot do this. I said to the room at large. I am leaving. Anna, please. my mother cried, stepping forward. Just stay for dinner. We can talk about it calmly. We can work out a payment plan. There is nothing to talk about. I am not a bank. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, intending to go out the back door to the driveway because my car was parked closer to the garage. I walked through the dining room and into the kitchen. It was renovated, just like I remembered from winter break years ago. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. I stopped. On the kitchen island, sitting next to the bowl of fruit, was a thick manila folder. It was labeled in my father's distinct, blocky handwriting, Simmons Family Plan. It was open. Papers were spilling out of it, as if someone had been reviewing them right before I arrived and had forgotten to put them away in the rush to get the pot roast out of the oven. I shouldn't have looked. I should have kept walking, but I stopped. I looked down at the top document. It was a spreadsheet. It was dated from 5 years ago. The columns were labeled Dad, Mom, Caleb, Anna. Under Caleb, there were rows of numbers: tuition, $40,000, rent subsidy, $1,200 per month, legal retainer, $5,000. Under Anna, the column was mostly zeros, but then my eye caught a document underneath the spreadsheet. It was a photocopy of a life insurance policy. Policy holder: Anna Marie Simmons. Beneficiary: Robert and Linda Simmons. Date opened: August 2014. I froze. August 2014. That was the year I turned 21. I was in college. I was working at the diner. I didn't have money for life insurance. I reached out and flipped the page. There was a credit card application. Chase Sapphire Preferred. Applicant: Anna M. Simmons. Co-applicant: Caleb Simmons. Date: February 2018. I had never applied for a Chase Sapphire card, and I certainly hadn't applied for one with Caleb. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. It wasn't a fast rhythm. It was a heavy, slow thud that echoed in my ears. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just them paying for him and not for me. This was fraud. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Anna, are you leaving? My mother called out. I grabbed my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I held it over the open folder. I snapped a photo of the credit card application. I snapped a photo of the life insurance policy. I snapped a photo of a document that looked like a deed transfer with a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. I shoved the phone back into my pocket just as my father appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing?" he asked. His voice was sharp, suspicious. I stepped away from the counter. I tried to make my face a mask. I tried to channel the cold, corporate persona I wore in board meetings. I was just looking for my keys. I said, "I think I left them in the car." He looked at the folder on the counter. Then he looked at me. His eyes narrowed. "That is private," he said. I didn't touch it. I lied. He took a step toward me. For a second, I was 18 again, and he was the giant who controlled my world. But I wasn't 18. I was 32. I was the director of communications. I had a lawyer on retainer at work. I have to go. "Dad," I said. I walked past him. I forced myself not to run. I could feel his eyes on my back. I could feel the heat radiating off him. I walked out the back door. The cool evening air hit my face like a slap. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and got in. I locked the doors immediately. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. I didn't look at the house. I didn't look at the window where I knew my mother was watching. I drove until I was 3 towns over. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy and put the car in park. I pulled out my phone. I opened the gallery. I zoomed in on the photo of the credit card application. Applicant: Anna M. Simmons, Social Security number, XXX-XX-XXXX. It was my number. I zoomed in on the signature. It was a loopy, cursive script. It looked like my signature, but the A was wrong. The slant was too steep. I swiped to the next photo. The deed transfer. It was for a timeshare in Florida. Joint tenants: Caleb Simmons and Anna Simmons. I sat there in the dark parking lot, illuminated only by the blue light of my phone screen. The family plan, wasn't a budget. It was a strategy. They weren't just using my money. They were using my identity. They were using my credit, my name, my clean record to buoy the wreckage of their own financial decisions. The loan they asked for tonight wasn't a request. It was just the visible tip of the iceberg. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone. Family sticks together. I thought about my father's lecture. This is what independence looks like. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I swallowed it down. Screaming wouldn't help. Screaming was what children did. I wasn't a child. I was a victim of identity theft, and the perpetrators were currently eating pot roast in the house where I grew up. I put the phone down. I took a deep breath. I didn't go back to my apartment. I didn't want to be alone, but I couldn't go to my friends. How could I explain this? My parents are criminals. It sounded insane. I drove to the office. I had a key card. I went up to the 12th floor. I sat in my corner office with the lights off, watching the city lights of Riverton blink below me. I opened my laptop. I didn't log into my work email. I opened a new browser window. I searched for Consumer Protection Attorneys Riverton. I wasn't going to lend them money. I wasn't going to fix their budget. I was going to audit them. The morning sun sliced through the blinds of my office, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but all I could see was the image on my laptop screen. It was the photo I had taken in my parents' kitchen, the one of the document buried in the Simmons family plan folder. I had enlarged it, zoomed in until the pixels blurred, trying to decipher the text at the header. It looked like a standard beneficiary designation form, or perhaps a power of attorney authorization. I had seen hundreds of them in my time at MedCorp, usually attached to life insurance enrollments or stock option grants, but seeing my name typed there, Anna M. Simmons, in a font I didn't use, next to a date from when I was barely old enough to vote, made my skin crawl. I needed an expert. I took a half day of personal time, telling my assistant I had a dental emergency. I drove to a brick building in downtown Riverton, 3 blocks from the courthouse, to meet with Elias Thorne. He was a consumer protection attorney with a reputation for being aggressive against debt collectors and credit bureaus. His office was lined with books that looked like they had been read, spines cracked and paper covers worn. Thorne was a man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and hands that were constantly moving, shuffling papers or tapping a pen. He studied the photo on his tablet for a long time. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air purifier in the corner. "This form," he said finally, sliding the tablet back across the desk. "It appears to be a limited power of attorney for financial management, or possibly a co-signer authorization for a revolving credit line. It is hard to say definitively without the rest of the page. The language here, joint and several liability and authorized user privileges, suggests it grants the holder the ability to act on behalf of the named party." He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "You say you did not sign this?" "No." I said, "I was in college 3 hours away on that date. I was working a double shift at the library." "I remember because it was the day before my midterms." Thorne nodded, but his expression remained cautious. "Here's the reality. Ms. Simmons, this is a photo of a document. It is not the document itself. In the eyes of the law, it is hearsay. It is a ghost. If you want to pursue this, if you want to claim fraud or identity theft, you need the original. You need a forensic handwriting analysis to prove the signature is forged." He leaned forward, his voice dropping an octave. "And I must warn you, these cases are messy. When the perpetrators are strangers, it is a calculation. When the perpetrators are parents, it is a war. If you accuse them without absolute, ironclad proof, they can turn it around. They can say you gave verbal consent. They can say you are confused. They can say you are malicious. You need to be sure before you pull the trigger." I left his office feeling a different kind of sickness. It wasn't the nausea of shock anymore. It was the vertigo of uncertainty. Thorne was right. I didn't have the gun. I just had a picture of the holster. I went home and did what I should have done years ago. I sat at my dining table, opened my laptop, and navigated to the centralized credit reporting site. I had checked my credit score casually over the years, usually through those free apps that give you a generic number, but I had never pulled the full raw data from the three major bureaus. I requested all three: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. I waited for the files to generate. The loading wheel spun on the screen, a mesmerizing circle of doom. When the reports opened, I started scrolling. I bypassed the accounts I knew, my student loans, my car loan, my current credit cards. I was looking for the anomalies, and there it was, hidden in the closed accounts section of the TransUnion report. A line item I had never seen before: Maple Valley Credit Union. Type: revolving line of credit. Date opened: October 2012. Date closed: January 2017. High balance: $5,000. Payment history: 30 days late, 2. 60 days late, 1. I stared at the screen. October 2012. I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore. That was the semester I was eating peanut butter from the jar because I couldn't afford bread. That was the semester I had a panic attack in the bathroom because of a $150 lab fee. While I was counting quarters for laundry, someone had opened a $5,000 line of credit in my name, and they had used it. The history showed it was maxed out almost immediately, then paid down slowly, with missed payments scattered like potholes. It was closed 2 years after I graduated. I felt a cold flush spread from my chest to my neck. $5,000. That money could have saved me. It could have meant I didn't have to work until 2 in the morning. It could have meant I slept more than 4 hours a night. But I never saw a dime of it. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady now. The anger had crystallized into something sharp and functional. I dialed my parents' landline. "Hello?" My mother answered. "Mom," I said, "I am looking at my credit report." There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted just a second too long. "Oh?" she said, her voice pitching up. "Why are you doing that? Applying for a mortgage?" "No, I am auditing my history. I found an account from Maple Valley Credit Union. Opened in 2012. Closed in 2017. $5,000 limit." I waited. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "It is in my name, Mom. But I didn't open it. I banked with the campus credit union. I have never been to Maple Valley." "But you have. Their branch is 3 miles from your house." "Anna, you are being ridiculous. You probably opened it for a promotion and forgot. You were so busy back then. You were always rushing around." "I did not forget a $5,000 line of credit," I said, my voice rising. "I was broke. Mom, I was starving. I would have remembered $5,000. "You sound paranoid," she said. The word was sharp, a practiced dismissal. "You have been working too hard. You are imagining things. Why would we know anything about your accounts? We told you to be independent. We stayed out of your finances. Because I saw the folder." I said, "I saw the papers on the counter." She gasped. Then, immediately, she started to cry. "I cannot believe this," she sobbed. "I cannot believe my own daughter is accusing me of what? Stealing? After everything we did for you? We gave you life. We supported you. And now, because of some computer glitch or some form you forgot, you are attacking us? You are breaking my heart. Anna, you are really breaking my heart." It was a performance. I recognized it now. It was the same tone she used when she wanted to return a dress she had already worn. The same tone she used to guilt my father into expensive vacations. It was weaponized victimhood. "Stop crying," I said. "You are so cold," she wailed. "Just like your father said, you have lost your compassion." I hung up. I sat there in the silence of my apartment. She hadn't denied it. Not really. She had deflected. She had attacked my memory. She had played the victim, but she hadn't said, "We did not do this." I needed physical proof. The digital trail was compelling, but the lawyer had said I needed the original. I needed to find the source. 2 weeks later, I drove down to their house. I called ahead and told them I was coming to pick up some winter coats I had left in the attic years ago. It was a flimsy excuse. I hadn't worn those coats in a decade, but I knew they would accept it because it normalized the relationship. It pretended the phone call hadn't happened. They were out when I arrived. My father was at the hardware store, my mother at her bridge club. I knew their schedule. I had a key, the spare one hidden under the fake rock in the garden, the one they thought I didn't know about. I let myself in. The house was quiet. The air smelled of lemon polish and secrets. I went straight to my old room. It was a guest office now. My bed was gone, replaced by a pull-out sofa. My posters were gone, replaced by generic landscape paintings. But the closet was the same. I opened the closet door. It was filled with my father's out-of-season suits and boxes of holiday decorations. I pushed the coats aside and knelt on the floor. When I was 14, I had discovered that the baseboard in the back corner of the closet was loose. I used to hide my journal there, slipping it into the hollow space between the drywall and the studs. I pried the board back with my fingernails. It gave with a small squeak. I reached into the dark void. My fingers brushed against dust, insulation, and then something cold and hard. I pulled it out. It was a metal cash box, gray, heavy, locked. I stared at it. It wasn't my box. I had never seen it before, but it was hidden in the one place in the house that had been exclusively mine. The one place they probably thought no one would ever look because the room had been repurposed. I shook it. Papers shifted inside, heavy papers. I tried to pry the lid open, but the lock was sturdy. I didn't want to break it here. If I took it, they would know. If I broke it and left it, they would know I'd been snooping. I took a picture of the box. I took a picture of the location. I noted the brand of the lock. I put the box back. I slid the baseboard into place. I stood up, dusting off my knees. The box existed. That was the first tangible confirmation. Normal people kept their financial records in a filing cabinet or a safe. People hiding things kept them in a cash box behind a loose board in a child's closet. I needed a witness. My Aunt Linda was my mother's younger sister. She was a kind, flighty woman who had always been the runner-up to my mother's main character energy. She lived in a condo on the other side of town and had a habit of drinking too much Pinot Grigio at lunch. I invited her to meet me at a bistro halfway between Riverton and my hometown. We ordered salads and white wine. I kept the conversation light at first. Work, the weather, her new cat. Then, after she had finished her first glass and ordered a second, I shifted the ground. You know, I said casually, I was looking at some old photos the other day. Remember that summer Caleb went to Europe? The travel program? Linda smiled, her eyes slightly glassy. Oh, yes, he was so excited. Your mother was so proud. I nodded. It must have been expensive. I was just thinking about how hard it must have been for them. I mean, with the renovation going on at the same time. Linda sighed, swirling her wine. Honey, it was a tight squeeze. I remember your dad stressed out of his mind. He came to me asking if I could float them alone. But you know, Uncle Jerry would never allow it. She took a sip. They had to get creative, she said, lowering her voice. The rates were sky high that year. I remember your mom saying they had to use the kids' names to get the better tier. Something about debt-to-income ratios being better if the accounts were spread out. I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. They used our names? I asked softly. Linda's eyes widened. She realized she had slipped. The wine had loosened the latch, but my question had kicked the door open. Oh, I don't know the details. Anna, I just meant, family planning, setting things up for the future. She looked down at her salad, stabbing a cherry tomato with unnecessary force. Linda, I said, did they take out loans in my name? She wouldn't meet my eyes. I shouldn't have said anything. It is not my business. Your parents love you. Anna, they did what they had to do to keep the ship afloat. You have to understand. They were underwater. The house, the lifestyle. They couldn't maintain it on paper without moving things around. She signaled the waiter for the check, her hands trembling slightly. Please don't tell them I said anything, she whispered. They would kill me. My therapist, Dr. Evans, sat in her armchair, her hands folded in her lap. I had spent the last 20 minutes pacing her office, recounting the credit report, the cash box, and Aunt Linda's slip. I feel like I'm going crazy, I said, stopping in front of the window. They act like I am the one who is attacking them. They act like I am betraying the family by asking where $5,000 went. Doctor. Evans adjusted her glasses. Anna, she said, I want you to listen to me carefully. In family systems theory, there are roles: the hero, the scapegoat, the mascot. And then there is the stabilizer. The stabilizer? The person who absorbs the shock. She explained, the person whose function is to remain steady so that the others can be chaotic. Your parents and your brother are a system of chaos. They spend, they risk, they live in a fantasy of wealth they do not possess. To sustain that fantasy, they need a reality anchor. They need someone to hold the debt. They need someone to carry the credit rating. She paused. You thought your independence was a lesson they were teaching you. You thought it was about building your character. I nodded. It wasn't, she said gently. It was resource extraction. They didn't push you away because they wanted you to be strong. They pushed you away because they needed your slot on the payroll to be empty so they could divert those resources to Caleb. And they needed your credit identity to be pristine so they could use it as a life raft when they sank. I sat down on the sofa. The air left my lungs. Resource extraction. My independence wasn't a virtue. It was a product they had manufactured so they could harvest it. I couldn't talk to my parents yet. I needed to talk to the other beneficiary of the system. I called Caleb and told him I wanted to buy him a drink. He agreed, suggesting a high-end whiskey bar downtown where cocktails cost $20. He arrived 20 minutes late, as usual. He ordered a double bourbon and leaned back, smiling. So, he said, are we still fighting about the mortgage thing? Because Mom is a wreck. She says you are going through a phase. I looked at him. He was wearing a watch that I knew cost more than my first car. Caleb, I said. I pulled my credit report. There was a loan opened in my name when I was 19. $5,000. Aunt Linda says Mom and Dad used our names to get better rates. Caleb didn't look shocked. He didn't look horrified. He took a sip of his bourbon and shrugged. Yeah, and, I repeated, that is fraud. Caleb, that is identity theft. It is family. Anna, he said, rolling his eyes. Jesus, you are so dramatic. They did what they had to do. They paid it back, didn't they? They paid it back years later. Meanwhile, I was starving. He sighed, setting his glass down. Look, I know you have this whole Orphan Annie narrative going on, but let's be real. They supported you in other ways. They gave you the structure. They made you tough. And they gave you the money. I said, he paused. He looked at me, assessing whether to lie or to brag. He chose the brag. Yeah, okay. They helped me. They paid for the tech school. They covered my rent for a couple of years. They put 10 grand into the sneaker business. So what? So what? I whispered. They knew you didn't need it, he said, leaning forward. That is the thing. Anna, they always said. Anna can handle herself. Anna is a machine. Anna doesn't need us. It was a compliment. They invested in me because I needed the runway. You were already flying. I stared at him. The twisted logic was breathtaking. They had punished me for my competence and rewarded him for his incompetence. They used my name to get the loans that paid for your runway. I said, he shrugged again. Team effort, sis. We all play our part. He signaled the waitress for another round. I stood up. I put a $20 bill on the table for my water, because old habits die hard. And I walked out. 3 nights later, there was a knock on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. It was my father. He was standing in the hallway, holding a manila envelope. He wasn't wearing his usual bluster. He looked tired. His shoulders were slumped, and he was wearing a cardigan I hadn't seen in years. I opened the door, but I didn't step back. I blocked the entrance. Dad, Anna, he said. Can I come in? No, he flinched. The rejection hit him, but he recovered. I just wanted to talk, face to face, no shouting. Your mother is not doing well. This stress is killing her. I said nothing. Look, he said, holding up the envelope. I know you are angry, and maybe we made some mistakes in how we communicated things, but we are at a breaking point. The bank is going to move on the house next week if we don't show a restructuring plan. He held the envelope out to me. I just need you to sign this. It is a modification agreement. It just says you are aware of the trust transfer. It doesn't cost you a dime. It doesn't put debt in your name. It just validates the asset pool so we can save the house. I looked at the envelope. I am not signing anything. I said, Anna, please, it is your childhood home. It is your inheritance. It is your leverage. I said, I am not signing it. I am not signing anything I haven't reviewed with my attorney. His face changed. The tired, soft father vanished. The hard, calculating stranger returned. His eyes went cold. Attorney, he said, you are involving lawyers now? Against your family? I am involving lawyers to protect myself from my family. I said. He took a step closer. He lowered his voice. It wasn't a shout. It was a murmur. Intimate and terrifying. You need to be careful. Anna, you are walking down a road you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I said, I understand about Maple Valley. I understand about the cash box. He didn't blink. You think you are so clean? He said. You think because you have this little job in this apartment that you are untouchable? I am clean. I said. He smiled. It was a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. You don't want people looking too closely at your history either, he said. What is that supposed to mean? It means that financial records are complicated things. Sometimes accounts get mixed. Sometimes names end up on documents that, well, that might look bad for a director of communications. You have a reputation to protect, don't you? It would be a shame if it came out that you were involved in some of the messier family business. I felt a chill that went straight to my marrow. He was threatening to frame me. He was implying that the fraud wasn't just something they had done to me, but something they had done with me, in a way I couldn't disprove. Are you threatening me? I asked. I am just saying, he replied, stepping back. Glass houses. Anna, just sign the papers. Save us all the trouble. He dropped the envelope on the doormat. Think about it. He turned and walked down the hallway. I watched him go. I watched the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had sat at the head of the table for 18 years, walk away after threatening to destroy my career to save his own skin. I looked down at the envelope. I didn't pick it up. I kicked it out into the hallway and slammed the door. I locked the deadbolt. Then I locked the chain. Then I slid a chair under the handle. I wasn't paranoid. I was under siege. I returned to Elias Thorne's office the next morning with the envelope my father had thrown at my door. I placed it on the mahogany desk as if it were a loaded weapon. He threatened me. I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were clasped tight in my lap to hide the tremor. He came to my apartment. He told me that I didn't want people looking too closely at my history. He implied that if I didn't sign this modification agreement, he would reveal something that would ruin my career. Thorne picked up the envelope. He didn't open it immediately. He looked at me, his eyes sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses. Extortion, he said quietly. That is the word for it. Anna, it is no longer a family dispute. It is extortion. He opened the envelope and slid out the document. It was a dense, multi-page agreement titled Asset Restructuring and Liability Assumption. He scanned it, his finger tracing the lines of legal jargon. This is garbage, he muttered. It attempts to retroactively assign you as a guarantor for a trust that holds the deed to their house. If you signed this, you would not just be helping them save the property, you would be assuming personal liability for the entire mortgage balance, plus the arrears, plus any future liens. You would be handcuffing yourself to a sinking ship. He looked up. And the threat? What exactly did he say? He said accounts get mixed. He said names end up on documents. He said it would be a shame if my reputation was damaged. Thorne leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked. He is bluffing, Thorne said, or more accurately, he is projecting. He is counting on your fear of scandal being greater than your desire for truth. But here's the problem with his strategy. If there are documents with your name on them that you did not sign, that is not your crime. That is his crime. He is threatening you with evidence of his own felony. I felt a cold knot loosen in my chest. So what do? We stop asking. Thorne said, we start demanding. We spent the next 2 hours drafting a formal demand letter. It was not a polite note from a daughter. It was a legal instrument. We demanded a full accounting of every financial instrument opened in my name since I was 18. We demanded copies of the promissory notes, the credit applications, and the transaction histories. We demanded the immediate cessation of any use of my personal information. Then Thorne gave me a list of instructions. Freeze everything, he said. The credit bureaus, check systems, the works. Lock it down so tight that you cannot even open a store credit card without a PIN number and a blood sample. And tell your employer. My stomach dropped. My employer? If he is threatening your reputation, you need to preempt him. Go to HR. Tell them you are the victim of identity theft involving a family member. You don't need to give them the gory details, but you need to put it on the record. If he calls them, and people like this often do when they feel cornered, you want the narrative to be harassment, not scandal. Walking into the Human Resources office at MedCorp was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I was the director of communications. I was the one who managed crises for the company. I was not supposed to be the crisis. The HR director, a woman named Karen who had always been kind to me, listened as I explained. I kept it clinical. I have discovered some irregularities in my credit history involving estranged family members, I said, forcing my voice to remain professional. I am working with legal counsel to resolve it. I have been threatened with reputational damage if I do not assume certain debts. I wanted to make you aware in case there are any unusual communications directed at the company. Karen looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and professional detachment. I am sorry you are going through that. Anna, she said, thank you for telling us. We will flag your file. If anyone calls asking for verification of employment or making allegations, we will direct them to legal and notify you immediately. You might want to consider taking a few days if you need to meet with your attorney. We can code it as personal leave. I walked out of her office feeling exposed, like a layer of skin had been peeled away, but I also felt lighter. I had detonated the bomb myself, on my own terms, before my father could throw it. I went back to my desk and started the freeze. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, Innovas. I created passwords that were strings of random characters. I set up two-factor authentication on everything. I was building a digital fortress. My phone started buzzing around 2 p.m. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again and again. Then the text started. How could you send a lawyer letter to your own parents? We are trying to save our home and you are treating us like criminals. I am shaking. Anna, I can't stop crying. Your father is beside himself. We fed you. We loved you. Betrayal. That is what this is. Absolute betrayal. I turned the phone face down on my desk. The vibration against the wood sounded like an angry insect. Then the silence came. My father didn't text. He didn't call. 2 days later, my cousin Sarah called me. The same cousin who had told me about the tuition at the barbecue. Hey, she said, I just wanted to check on you. I am fine. Sarah, why? Well, Uncle Robert called my mom last night. He sounded really worried. He said you are having some kind of episode. He said you are spiraling and making up stories because of stress at work. He used the word unstable. I closed my eyes. Of course, the narrative shift. If I wasn't compliant, I must be crazy. He is lying. Sarah, I said, I found credit lines they opened in my name. I hired a lawyer to get the records. That is the episode. There was a long silence on the other end. God, Anna, I believe you. But you know how the family is. They believe what they want to believe. Mom is already talking about how sad it is that you are pushing everyone away. Let them talk, I said. Though the words tasted like ash, I have the receipts. The following Tuesday, I received a letter. It wasn't from my parents. It wasn't from Thorne. It was from a bank called Maple Harbor Federal. I had never heard of Maple Harbor Federal. I opened the envelope standing by my mailbox in the lobby of the Meridian. Dear valued customer, this letter is to inform you that we were unable to process your recent account update request due to a signature discrepancy. For your security, changes to authorized users cannot be completed without in-person verification or a notarized affidavit. Please visit your local branch to resolve this matter. Reference number 884-29A. I stared at the paper. Account update request. Recent. This wasn't a ghost from 10 years ago. This was happening now, while I was freezing my credit, while I was drafting demand letters. Someone was trying to modify an account I didn't even know existed. I looked up the bank on my phone. Maple Harbor Federal. It was a small, regional credit union. There was a branch in Riverton, and there was a branch in the suburb where my parents lived. I didn't call. I got in my car and drove to the Riverton branch. I walked in with my passport, my driver's license, and the letter. I sat down at the desk of a personal banker, a young woman named Ms. Cheng. I received this letter. I said, sliding it across the desk, I do not have an account here, or at least, I didn't think I did. I want to know what this request was. Ms. Cheng typed the reference number into her computer. Her brow furrowed. Ms. Simmons, I see the account here. It is a joint savings account. Opened. Oh, quite a while ago. 2014. Joint with whom? She turned the screen slightly away. I can only discuss the account details with the account holder. You are listed as a secondary owner. The primary holder is Robert Simmons, my father. And the request? I asked. The one that was flagged? She clicked a few more keys. It looks like a request was submitted last Thursday to add a checking line to the account and link it for overdraft protection. The request form was dropped off at our Oakwood branch. Oakwood, that was the branch 3 miles from my parents' house. The form was signed. Ms. Cheng continued, but the signature on the form did not match the signature card we have on file for you from 2014. That is why it was flagged. Can I see the signature card from 2014? I asked. She hesitated. I can't show you the digital image without a subpoena. Usually. But since you are here with ID... She turned the screen. There was a scanned index card. On the line for secondary owner. There was a signature. Anna Simmons. It was my mother's handwriting. The loopy A, the soft slant, and the new request. The one from last Thursday? She clicked to a new document. A scanned form. The signature there was different. It was jagged. Rushed. It looked like my father's handwriting trying to look like mine. They were getting sloppy. They were desperate. They were trying to open a new channel for cash flow because I had cut off the others. I need to close this account. I said, I can remove you from it. Ms. Chung said, but I cannot close it without the primary holder's consent. Remove me, I said, and I want a printout of the entire transaction history. I walked out of the bank with a stack of papers an inch thick. I sat in my car and flipped through them. It was a slush fund. Transfers in. Transfers out. Deposits that looked like rental income. Withdrawals at casinos. Withdrawals at liquor stores. And my name attached to all of it. A silent partner in their reckless life. This wasn't just emotional manipulation. This wasn't just borrowing. This was an active, ongoing criminal enterprise run by the people who had taught me to tie my shoes. I felt the old instinct rise up. The desire to retreat. To hide. To go numb. To tell myself it wasn't that bad. To protect them. Then I looked at the date on the failed request. Last Thursday, 2 days after my father had come to my door, he had looked me in the eye, threatened me, and then gone straight to the bank to try to forge my name again. I killed the instinct. I strangled it with cold, hard rage. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to document every single cent. I needed to cut off their last ally. I texted Caleb, meet me at the Starbucks on 3rd Street. 1 hour. If you don't come, I am handing your name to the police along with Mom and Dad's. He was there in 40 minutes. He looked different. The swagger was gone. He was wearing a hoodie with the hood up, and he looked pale. He was tapping his foot nervously against the leg of the table. I sat down across from him. I didn't buy a coffee. I went to the bank today. I said, Maple Harbor Federal. Caleb flinched. He looked at his hands. I didn't know about that one. He muttered. You knew about the others. I said. He didn't answer. Caleb, look at me. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked like a scared kid, not a budding entrepreneur. I am done. I said, I have hired a forensic accountant. I have a lawyer drafting criminal complaints. I'm going to expose everything. The student loans you didn't pay for, the credit cards, the refinances. He swallowed hard. Anna, you can't. It will kill them. Dad has a heart condition. Dad has a fraud condition. I snapped. And you are an accessory. I leaned across the table. Here's the choice, Caleb, and this is the only time I'm going to offer it. You tell me everything, right now. You tell me what you signed, what you knew, and where the money went. If you tell the truth, I will leave your name out of the initial complaint. I will focus on them. But if you lie to me, or if you try to protect them, I will burn you down with them. He stared at me. He saw the resolve in my face. He saw that the sister who used to send him birthday money was gone. He slumped in his chair. He put his head in his hands. I didn't read them. He whispered. What? The papers, he said, his voice muffled. I never read them. Mom would just put a stack in front of me. She would say, sign here, it is for the business loan. Or, sign here, it is for the car insurance. I just signed. I thought they knew what they were doing. You are 30 years old. Caleb, I said, you didn't think it was weird that you were signing loan documents every 6 months? I knew, he exploded, keeping his voice to a harsh whisper. I knew, okay? I knew we didn't have the money. I knew the business wasn't making a profit. But what was I supposed to do? Get a job? They told me I was special. They told me I was going to be big. They paid for my apartment. They paid for my lease. If I asked questions, the money stopped. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't a noble confession. It was the pathetic admission of a parasite who realized the host was dying. They always said you could handle yourself, he said, echoing the words he had said before, but this time with bitterness. Anna is fine. Anna is strong. We don't need to worry about Anna. So they used you as the backstop, and they used me as the excuse. He wiped his nose with his sleeve. They refinanced the house 4 times. Anna, 4 times in 10 years. Every time the equity built up, they stripped it out. The Europe trip? Refinance. The renovation? Refinance. My seed capital? Refinance. And now the well is dry. I said, yeah, the well is dry, and the house is underwater. I looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He was a victim too, in a way. They had crippled him with kindness. They had bought his loyalty with stolen money and left him unable to function in the real world. But he was also a grown man who had watched me struggle and done nothing. Write it down. I said, what? Write down the dates, the amounts, the banks, everything you remember. Send it to me by tonight. He nodded, sniffing. Are you really going to send them to jail? He asked. I stood up. I am not deciding their future. Caleb, they decided it when they stole my identity. I am just tallying the bill. I went back to Thorne with the bank records and Caleb's list. We laid it all out on his conference table. It was a map of destruction. They had been cycling debt for 15 years. They would open a card in my name. Max it out. Use the cash to pay the minimums on a loan in Caleb's name. Then refinance the house to pay off the card. Then open a new line of credit in my father's name. It was a shell game. And the timing. That was the part that hurt the most. I looked at the dates of the refinances. May 2012, my high school graduation. They cashed out $40,000. They told me they couldn't afford a cent for my tuition, but they had $40,000 in liquid cash that month. December 2016. My college graduation, another cash out, $20,000. That was the year they bought the new car. They had celebrated my milestones by leveraging the family home. And then hoarding the proceeds while I drowned in interest payments. They had used family unity as a cover story, while they systematically shifted the risk onto the children. I looked at Thorne. I am ready. I said. We sent the final notice. We requested a meeting. The terms were non-negotiable. Neutral location. A conference room at a mediation center downtown. No phones. Attorneys present. I expected them to fight. I expected them to stall, but they accepted within an hour. Thorne was suspicious. They are too eager, he said, tapping the email response. They think they have a card to play. They think they can get in a room with you and twist the reality until you break. Let them try, I said. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. The city of Riverton was quiet outside my window, but my mind was a loud, chaotic storm. I kept thinking about my father's threat. You don't want people looking too closely at your history. What did he mean? Was it just a bluff? Or was there something I had missed? Something I had actually signed in a moment of weakness or trust? I got out of bed at 3 a.m. I poured a glass of water and opened my laptop. I went to my email archives. I searched for everything from before 2015. I searched for Dad, Mom, sign, form, help, thousands of emails, most of them irrelevant, forwarded jokes, birthday wishes. Then I searched for tuition. I found an email from my sophomore year, October, the same month the Maple Valley account was opened. Subject: FAFSA info needed. From Dad to Anna. Hi, honey. We are trying to see if we can get you some extra aid for next semester. The financial aid office said we need to update some forms. I filled them out. Just need you to look them over. Can you check the attached? There was an attachment. Simmons_aid_form, PDF. I clicked it. It downloaded. I opened the PDF. It wasn't a FAFSA form. It was a generic credit authorization release. It was typed, my name, my social security number, my dorm address, and at the bottom, there was a signature. It was a digital signature. A font, Anna Simmons. But below it, there was a handwritten date. The handwriting for the date was distinctive. The 7 had a cross through it. I didn't cross my 7s. My father did. I stared at the screen. He had tricked me. He had framed it as financial aid help, the one thing he knew I was desperate for, and used it to get me to open a file that likely contained a tracker or a hidden authorization, or simply to establish a paper trail that looked like I was involved. But he had slipped up. He had dated it himself. I zoomed in on the date. The ink was slightly different from the digital text. This was it. This was the proof that I hadn't consented. He had sent me a decoy email to cover his tracks, but he had executed the document himself. I printed the email. I printed the attachment. I put them in a folder. I walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. The sun was just starting to crest over the river, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I wasn't the scared girl at the kitchen table anymore. I wasn't the exhausted student in the diner. I wasn't the dutiful daughter sending silk scarves. I was the evidence, and tomorrow, I was going to testify. The conference room in the mediation center was a study in aggressive neutrality. The walls were a calm, non-committal beige. The table was a vast expanse of polished mahogany that reflected the recessed lighting above. The chairs were ergonomic and expensive, designed to keep people comfortable while they dismantled their relationships. I sat on one side of the table, my hands resting flat on the cool wood. Elias Thorne sat next to me. He had his legal pad out, a pen poised in his hand, and a stack of files organized with military precision in front of him. I checked my watch. 9 o'clock exactly. The door opened. My parents walked in. They were dressed for church. That was the first thing that hit me. A physical blow to the chest. My mother was wearing a soft blue cardigan and her pearl necklace, the one she wore to Easter services and weddings. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, stiff with hairspray. My father wore his navy blazer and khaki slacks, his shoes polished to a high shine. They looked respectable. They looked kindly. They looked like the grandparents in a pharmaceutical commercial. The ones who walk on the beach holding hands while a narrator lists side effects in a soothing voice. They were smiling. Not a nervous smile, but a bright, beaming smile that seemed to suggest we were all meeting for brunch rather than to discuss 15 years of systematic financial abuse. "Anna!" my mother exclaimed. stepping forward as if to hug me. "You look wonderful. I love that suit. Is that the one you wore to the awards ceremony?" I didn't stand up. I didn't smile back. "Please take a seat," Elias Thorne said. His voice was dry, cutting through the performance like a scalpel. My parents faltered. The smile slipped from my mother's face, replaced by a look of wounded confusion. She looked at my father. He nodded reassuringly and pulled out a chair for her. Caleb entered a moment later. He didn't look like them. He looked haggard. He was wearing a button-down shirt that hadn't been ironed, and he kept his eyes on the floor. He sat at the far end of the table, putting distance between himself and our parents, and even more distance between himself and me. "We are here," my father announced, clasping his hands on the table. "We are here because we want to resolve this misunderstanding. We want to clear the air." He looked at me with a gaze that was practiced in its sincerity. "Anna," he said, "we know you are upset. We know that looking at cold numbers on a page can be confusing without the context. We just want to explain the context." I waited. Thorne waited. "Everything we did," my father continued, his voice taking on a rhythmic, preaching cadence. "We did for the family. The Simmons family is a unit. We pool our resources. We share our burdens. That is how we have always operated." He gestured to the papers in front of Thorne. "Those accounts? Those loans? Those were part of a strategy we agreed upon years ago, when you were in college. We talked about this. We sat at the kitchen table and discussed how we needed to leverage our collective credit to build a future for all of us. You agreed to help. You said, and I quote, 'I want to do my part.'" I stared at him. I felt a surreal sense of dislocation. He was rewriting reality in real time. "I never agreed to open a line of credit at Maple Valley." I said quietly, "I never agreed to refinance the house in my name." My father shook his head sadly. "You were young, Anna. You were 18, 19. You were busy with your studies. You probably don't remember the specific conversations, but the spirit of the agreement was clear. You authorized us to manage the family estate. We treated your credit as part of that estate. It was harmless housekeeping, moving numbers from one column to another to keep the roof over our heads." "Harmless," Thorne repeated. He picked up a document. "You call opening a $5,000 credit line in a student's name, maxing it out, and defaulting on payments harmless? Ms. Simmons' credit score was impacted for 7 years. It was a mistake," my mother interjected, leaning forward. "An administrative oversight. We meant to pay it off sooner, but the market turned. We never meant to hurt Anna. We were protecting her. If we hadn't taken those steps, we would have lost the house back then. Where would she have come home to?" She looked at me, her eyes shimmering with tears that appeared on command. "We did it for you, Anna, to give you a home." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had told me to figure it out like an adult when I couldn't buy groceries. I reached into my bag. My hand brushed against the folder I had prepared the night before. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the printout of the scanned form I had found in the email archive, the one from my sophomore year. I slid it across the mahogany table. It spun slowly and came to a rest in front of my father. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. My father glanced at it. He didn't touch it. "It looks like one of the aid forms we handled for you," he said dismissively. "Like I said, you authorized us to—" "Look at the date," I said. He looked. "October 12th, 2012. I read aloud. I was in the library studying for a Western civilization midterm. I remember because I spilled coffee on my notes that morning. I pointed to the signature at the bottom. That is my name. It is typed. But look at the handwritten date next to it." My father stared at the paper. His jaw tightened. "The 7. I said, "The 7 in the year 2012. It has a cross through it, a horizontal line." I paused. "I don't cross my 7s. Dad, I never have. You do. You learned it in drafting class in high school. You have done it on every birthday card you ever sent me." The room went quiet. The hum of the air conditioning seemed to roar. My mother looked at the paper, then at my father. She paled beneath her blush. "And this," I said, sliding a second document across the table. This is a report from Maple Harbor Federal from last week, Thursday. 2 days after you came to my apartment, I looked him dead in the eye. An account update request. Attempted at the Oakwood branch. Flagged for signature mismatch. I leaned forward. I didn't verbally agree to that. Dad, I wasn't even speaking to you. You tried to forge my signature to open a checking line on an account I didn't know existed, while you were actively threatening me to sign a modification agreement. My father's face changed. The benevolent patriarch vanished. The kindly grandfather mask dissolved. Beneath it was something hard, ugly, and cornered. He sat back in his chair. He didn't look at the paper anymore. He looked at me. "You are making a mistake, Anna," he said. His voice was low, devoid of the preaching tone. "Am I? You are looking at this through a keyhole." He said, "You see one form, one date. You don't see the big picture. The big picture is fraud." Thorne said. My father ignored him. He kept his eyes locked on mine. "You have a nice life, Anna. You have a big job. Director of Communications. That is a position that requires trust. It requires a clean reputation." I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. "If you pursue this," he said, dragging the words out, "if you drag the family name through the mud, people are going to ask questions. They are going to ask why a daughter would attack her own parents. They are going to wonder if you are stable. They are going to wonder if you were complicit." He leaned in. "I know things. Anna, I know how the world works. Once a scandal starts, it doesn't matter who is right. The stain spreads. You don't want your employers asking why you are involved in a messy financial dispute. You don't want them looking too closely at your background." He was doubling down. He was banking on my fear. He was betting that I loved my career more than I hated his betrayal. He was betting that shame would silence me, just like it always had. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a giant. I saw a small, frightened man who was used to bullying his way out of consequences. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear, it was grief. I was grieving the death of the last hope I had. The hope that deep down, beneath the selfishness and the neglect, he actually loved me. The hope that he was just misguided, not malicious, but you don't threaten to destroy the career of someone you love. You don't blackmail your child. I took a breath. It was shaky, but the air filled my lungs. "Mr. Simmons," Thorne said, his voice loud and authoritative, "let me be absolutely clear about what the evidence suggests. We have a pattern of unauthorized credit inquiries, forged signatures on promissory notes, and the misappropriation of funds totaling over $100,000 over a period of 10 years. This constitutes wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft. These are federal crimes." Thorne opened a folder. "We have the affidavit from the bank regarding the attempt last Thursday. We have the IP addresses used to access Anna's credit reports. We have the forensic analysis of the handwriting on the 2012 document." He looked at my parents. "We are not here to negotiate a misunderstanding. We are here to offer you a way to avoid a criminal referral." My mother made a sound, a choked, high-pitched sob. "Criminal?" she gasped. "Robert, they are talking about jail." She turned to me. Her eyes were wide and wet. "Anna, please, you cannot do this. We are your parents. We changed your diapers. We sat up with you when you had the chicken pox. You are going to send us to prison? Over money?" "It is not over money. Mom," I said, "it is over the fact that you stole my name. But we are losing the house," she cried, slamming her hand on the table. "The bank is going to take it next month if we don't fix this. Where will we go? We are in our 60s. Do you want us on the street? Is that what independence means to you?" She reached out across the table. Trying to grab my hand, I pulled it back. "Be the good one, Anna," she pleaded. "You have always been the good one, the strong one. Caleb couldn't handle this. But you can. You can absorb it. Just sign the papers. Just let us fix the house, and we will pay you back, I swear. Prove that you are the bigger person. Prove that independence means forgiveness." I looked at her. She was using the same old words. Good, strong, absorb. She was asking me to be the sponge again. She wanted me to soak up their mess so they could stay dry. "Mom," I said, "did you know about the account in 2012? She froze. "Did you know?" I asked again. She looked at my father. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. "I don't recall." She stammered. "It was so long ago. Why does it matter?" "It matters because I was hungry." I said, "I was working the night shift and eating leftovers. And you had $5,000 in my name." "Anna," she wailed, "stop living in the past." I turned my head. I looked down the long table to the end. Where Caleb was sitting, he had been silent this whole time. He was twisting a paperclip in his hands, bending the metal until it snapped. "Caleb?" I said. He looked up. His face was pale. "They are saying I agreed to this." I said, "They are saying it was a family strategy. Did I agree?" Caleb looked at our father. My father's eyes were hard, a warning glare that promised retribution. Then he looked at our mother, who was weeping into a tissue. Then he looked at me. He saw the sister who had sent him money when he was broke. He saw the sister who had bought him dinner 3 nights ago and offered him a lifeboat. He took a deep breath. "No," he said. His voice was cracked. "What did you say?" My father snapped. "She didn't agree," Caleb said, louder this time. "She didn't know." "Caleb," my mother hissed, "don't you dare." "I signed the papers too," Caleb said, talking over her. He looked at me, his eyes full of misery. "I signed the modification agreement last year, and the refinance in 2018, and the car loan. I signed them because you told me to. You told me Anna was too busy, and that I had to sign as the secondary to keep the rates down." He stood up. He looked shaky, but he stayed on his feet. "They paid for my school. Anna, they paid my rent. They gave me the money from the refinances. They told me you were doing fine and didn't need it." He looked at our parents. "You lied to her, and you lied to me. You told me she knew. You told me she was on board, but just didn't want to deal with the paperwork. You ungrateful little—" My father started, half rising from his chair. "Sit down," Thorne barked. Caleb didn't sit. He looked at me. "I am not letting you take the fall for this. Anna, I am a screw-up. I know that. I haven't done anything right in my life. But I'm not going to let them pin this on you. I am ready to testify that I signed documents without your consent because they told me to." The air in the room changed. It shifted from a negotiation to a verdict. My father sank back into his chair. His leverage, the united front, the family narrative, had just collapsed. My mother stopped crying. She looked at Caleb with a look of pure shock, as if the family dog had suddenly started speaking French. "Thank you, Caleb," I said softly. I turned back to my parents. I picked up the 2 sheets of paper, the email from 2012 and the bank report from last week. I stacked them neatly. I looked at Thorne. He nodded. I turned to face my father. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. "I am giving you 2 options. Option A." I held up one finger. "You will sign a full release of all financial records associated with my name or social security number. You will sign a notarized affidavit admitting that the accounts listed in our demand letter were opened without my knowledge or consent. You will close every single account attached to my name within 48 hours, and you will never, ever use my identity for anything again. Not a library card, not a raffle ticket, nothing." I took a breath. "If you do this, I will agree to a civil settlement regarding the debt. I will not press criminal charges for the past fraud. I will walk away, and you will never hear from me again. You keep the house. You lose the house. I don't care, but I am gone." My father's eyes narrowed. He was calculating. "And option B?" he asked. "Option B." I said. I looked at Thorne. He slid a thick file across the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "This file contains the completed police reports for identity theft, wire fraud, and forgery. It contains a formal complaint to the Federal Trade Commission. It contains a letter to the State Attorney General's office." I looked at my father. "If you do not agree to option A, right now, in this room, My attorney will walk out that door and file these reports. I will go public. I will tell my employer exactly what is happening. I will tell the family. I will testify in court, and with Caleb's testimony, and the handwriting analysis, and the IP logs, you will go to prison. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother looked at the file. She looked at the thickness of it. She looked at the reality of it. But the family name, she whispered. The neighbors. I don't care about the neighbors. Mom. I said, I care about the truth. I looked at my father. Choose, I said. He looked at the file. Then he looked at me. I expected him to apologize. I expected him to finally say he was sorry. I expected him to show some shred of fatherly instinct, some desire to protect his child from the pain of sending her parents to jail. But as I watched his eyes dart back and forth, from the papers to the door to my mother, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. He wasn't wrestling with his conscience. He wasn't feeling remorse. He was doing math. He was calculating the odds of a conviction. He was estimating the cost of a defense attorney versus the cost of losing his line of credit. He was weighing the humiliation of a public trial against the inconvenience of losing his favorite financial crutch. He looked at me, and his eyes were cold and flat. Fine, he said. Just one word. Fine. No apology. No, I love you. No, I'm sorry. Just the transaction. We will sign the release, he said. But I want a clause that says you cannot discuss this with the extended family. I don't want your Aunt Linda knowing our business. I almost laughed. It would have been a hysterical, broken sound. He was facing felony charges, and he was worried about Aunt Linda's gossip. We can include a non-disparagement clause, Thorne said smoothly. Provided you adhere to the strict terms of the separation. My mother looked at my father. Robert, we are just agreeing? We don't have a choice. Linda, he snapped. He looked at me with open disdain. She has cornered us. He picked up the pen Thorne offered. He didn't look at me as he signed. He signed his name with angry, sharp strokes. My mother took the pen. Her hand shook. She looked at me one last time, her eyes searching for the daughter who used to bake cookies and draw pictures. You are hard. Anna, she whispered, you have become so hard. I am not hard. Mom, I said, watching the ink dry on the page that would finally set me free. I am independent. She signed. I took the papers. I didn't say goodbye. I stood up, nodded to Caleb, and walked out of the room. I walked out of the building and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the parking lot. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like car exhaust and hot asphalt, but to me, it tasted like oxygen. I was alone. I had no parents. I had a brother who was broken. I had a mountain of trauma to climb, but as I unlocked my car, paid for with my money, in my name, I realized that for the first time in my life, the ground beneath my feet was solid. They had spent years teaching me that independence was a punishment. They were wrong. It was a reward. Thank you so much for listening to Anna's story. It's a heavy one. I know. Navigating family betrayal is something no one should have to go through. But sadly, so many do. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from today? And more importantly, what did you think of Anna's decision in the end? Did she make the right call offering them a way out? Or should she have gone with option B immediately? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more deep dives into complex, emotional, and realistic dramas. Share your thoughts in English below. I read every single one. Until next time, stay strong.